I'm gonna. I'm sorry.
And you introduce me.
I'm introducing you.
Oh, lovely. Oh, isn't that great? Thank you.
I think we should start. Let me start by welcoming you to the EDA at the Design Media Arts Department. I am honored, and it's a pleasure to introduce UC Regents Professor Lars Müller, a graphic designer and a publisher of books. Especially now in this digital world we live in, and especially here at the Design Media Arts Department, with a heavy focus on technology, it's really nice to have Lars visiting and do this lecture. Print is not dead. With the development of online-based information, printed matter needs to focus on its own specific qualities. And I kind of feel a new interest in printed matter, and I think the amount and the popularity of the art book fairs all over the globe has been showing that interest, and it's nice that these art book fairs showcase small publishing houses and talk about DIY publishing. Now, one would think that the relationship of book designers, bookmakers, and publishers is a really tight fit. However, designing books and selling books are two completely different things. Let me throw in a personal anecdote. As a very young designer, not so experienced, I was asked to do the book cover for the Dutch translation of A Home at the End of the World, the first novel by Michael Cunningham in 1990, who later wrote The Hours, and both movies are made into movies. Both books are made into movies. I had read the book or the manuscript in one go and really loved it, and started to communicate with Cunningham through email, discussed ideas and showed him sketches, which basically led to a design that we both approved of, which I then sent to the Dutch publisher. I think I got an email back in 12 hours, which read the following lines. Even though this design might reflect the book Cunningham has written, it is not the book we want to sell. At that point, I really didn't understand what that meant. I now have a better clue, but back to Lars. Born in Norway in 1955, Lars Müller moved to Switzerland in 1963 and studied graphic design in Zurich from 1975 to 1979. In 1981, he worked as an assistant to Wim Crouwel, famous Dutch designer, at the legendary Total Design Agency in Amsterdam. I didn't know that, that was new to me. It was there where his interest in books and book design started. While working as a self-employed graphic designer, Muller founded his publishing house in Baden, Switzerland in 1983. Muller is selective in his choice of content and searches for the appropriate form and materials for its presentation. He sets limits that reveal his own creative convictions as a designer while also expressing his rootedness in the tradition of modern Swiss graphic design. In Europe. Since 2009, he has been a guest lecturer at Harvard University Graduate School of Design. He frequently serves on academic and competition juries and is currently a member of the steering board of Design Preis Schweiz. From 2013 to 2015, Muller was the international president of the Alliance Graphique Internationale, kind of the club that every designer in the world wants to become a member of, and I think you have to go through various selection to get in. Now, with a team of 10 employees, the Lars Müller Design Studio and Publishing House are now based in Zurich. Lars Müller Publishers is an internationally renowned publishing house and has made a worldwide name for itself with carefully edited and designed publications on architecture, design, photography, contemporary art, and society. The company has released over 600 books. Two titles that come to mind now, which you might know, is The Ode to Typeface Helvetica, which is quite a long time ago. Huh? And then the other that comes to mind is a book on human rights. Your physical experience, your analog experience, will contribute to yourself and to your ability to maneuver yourself through this crazy place we live in, Muller once said. If I ask you what you read, then you already leave a trace of who you are. With no further ado, Lars Müller.
Thank you, Henry. It's all said. I try to bring that down again to real. I would like to address the students, some of whom I have the privilege to work with. You are bright, talented, and hungry. I hope that my thoughts may make sense to you and that we can meet for further discussion. Now, recently, in conversation with a group of young architects in Switzerland, I claimed that it makes sense to concentrate I claimed that it makes little sense to concentrate only on showing and explaining examples of one's work in lectures when every design practice already has its own portfolio website and people will know about your achievements long before you arrive on stage. But the internet rarely tells you anything about people's convictions, their aspirations, and struggles. Would it make sense to present fewer works in lectures, but more thoughts instead? Or at least to embed the work in a wider context? I do my best to follow this precept. Analog reality. We can't deny the fact that our life remains analog despite the massive changes that IT and the related devices have brought to our everyday routines. Being here as your guest, for example, life as a material system has consequences for my carbon footprint, which is in any case alarming. Just flying from Europe to Los Angeles and back adds half a planet to my negative record. Last year, my consumption was 4.5 planets, and this year won't be any better. I'm worried. As a walking advertisement for an industry that depends so much on the physicality of its product, I struggle to find alternatives to what I have become used to and love doing, traveling the world together with my books, to Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Shanghai, or New York for exhibitions and conferences. Smart and efficient technology is becoming available in airplanes and communication tools. I once experienced holding a lecture via Skype. It isn't appealing at all to look into a camera instead of the eyes of your audience. New technology will not replace my insane mobility. but I can still hope that my activities contribute to the awareness of others and might encourage them to change their habits. It is a weak excuse. During this quarter, our studio class is discussing in depth the consequences of design in our lives. By asking, are we human? We pose the question of whether we are in control of design and the endless tools and achievements that have been invented over many thousands of years. Or whether, to the contrary, the human has become a product of design. Reflecting on the design that surrounds us, both the obviously visible, physical design, and the invisible designer babies and or Hubble signals from outer space, we may feel either excited or frightened or both. The destiny of man is progress and growth. Whether we like it or not, as artists, architects, and designers, we are accomplices in the big game. Without arrogance, I can say that I'm convinced that we as designers must be ahead of our audience. Only our lead in awareness, knowledge, and experience makes it legitimate for us to offer solutions and suggestions to other people. In order to find my own position in this game, to think independently, and to act freely, I define 3 fundamental conditions for my life. Authenticity means to know who I am and where I come from, to recall my earliest memories, and to realize that I grew up in a continuum of events in real time. It is fundamentally analog experience in a social and cultural environment that made me become me. On this basis, we develop our personalities and recognize our strengths and acknowledge our weaknesses. My uniqueness is the source of a self-determined life. New media and technology suggest the illusion that there is an identity outside of oneself. But there is no way to escape your authentic body. Face it and live a life in real time, breath by breath, without interruption. Authenticity is the aggregate of yourself. The integrity of a person is articulated in his or her beliefs, behavior, and actions, how we live and what we do. Parts of our personalities are given, while other parts are shaped over time. Both parts are precious. They are symbiotic and indivisible. As designers, we must have a high degree of awareness for authenticity. It determines our ability to think for others and to anticipate the consequences of what we do. If we recognize the world as an analog totality, defined by physicality, by volume and weight, and not least by our fragile bodies, we become aware of the systems that rule the whole. I see this awareness and the understanding of systems not only as a precondition for an authentic life, but also as a significant driver of change. We interact daily with and within systems, starting from our own body, our digestive system, our nervous system, the cardiovascular system, and then there are communication systems, air traffic control systems, trade, finances, democracy, and so forth. On the other end of the scale, we observe the solar system and search for the master system beyond. From the simple to the most complex, all systems depend on the precise interaction of their components. These systems are vulnerable. As a boy, I opened my alarm clock to observe its functioning and get behind the tick-tock. What caught my interest was the little balance wheel which was moved by a little torsion spring, which, of course, once loosened, I never got back into working order again. Once the mechanical world fully satisfied our joy of discovery, and for a very long time, our tools of communication expressed their functionality with typical sounds, like with the typewriter, the phone, and the camera. Some of us may remember that very distinct, elegant sound. Not so anymore. Oops. Oh, that's a mistake. I lost an image here. It should be this. Oh, here it is. Anyway, not so anymore. The blank face of our most used device doesn't reveal any of its many functions. But of course, information technology and all electronic devices depend on sophisticated mathematical systems. How does this express itself in our discipline? Systemic thinking is inherent in every design process. In fact, it is a very human approach to analyzing and understanding the nature of a problem. Our success depends on the completeness of our observations. In general, lacking a fundamental grasp of systems will necessarily lead to poor results. Visualizing a system may help to reveal the weak spots. And sharing the model with the audience may facilitate access to the content, those are systems or book concepts, which we develop far ahead of the design of a book, just to communicate and find agreement with all the participants in what it is about. At times, the visualized system itself is the solution, like Vignelli's subway map of New York from 1972. Citizenship is the third of my conditions for understanding and accepting the responsibility I bear as a designer. Being a citizen means participating in the enduring process of building, shaping, and sustaining society with a fundamental understanding of all communities as the social and cultural drivers of society. Rural, suburban, or urban communities are the places where we shape societies through interaction and where the principles of equality, diversity, inclusivity, and solidarity are lived and exercised. Here we can experience new models of living together and define the rules we want the government and lawmakers to abide by in governing our country. That's citizens. Think global, act local, as Buckminster Fuller urged us to do in 1929, will allow us to behave as citizens in our closest communities, our nations, and as inhabitants of the global village. This is the analog reality, and authenticity, system awareness, and citizenship are the premises for change. It is the destiny of humankind, due to its intelligence, to strive for change and progress. More than ever, we must do so with the utmost of mindfulness and care, so as not to endanger the great achievements of civilization. As designers of all kinds, we are more aware than many others. We are in the vanguard of the movement. We are the transformers of new achievements in science and technology. We validate content. We communicate with the help of analogies and metaphors, with unseen images, and, on top of the function, with the beauty of our design. What a challenge, you may say. And you are right. Being a designer means much more than giving form to prefabricated content. Create content, edit content, become authors and editors. Put information and animation in the place of manipulation and consumption. Arm yourself with knowledge, wit, and humor. Take advantage of the marvelous UCLA community and build bridges to other disciplines. Make friends with interesting people, assuming they are as curious about you as you are about them. Collaborate, activate. It is by far not only climate change that demands our comprehension and action. Democracy is equally endangered, as is the concept of human rights. Take action and don't leave it to politics. In 30 years, your generation will rule the world. By the way, did you watch the lunar eclipse the other night? A poetic non-event, so to speak. Slow motion in real time. Super analog and easy to explain. And yet, something that moved its viewers. I watched them watching. The incident made them think. This reminded me of what Susan Sontag once wrote. Nobody can think and hit someone at the same time. So let's make people think. When it comes to my own work and my own activity as a designer and publisher, I must confess that it is a challenging task to live up to all of one's ideas, ideals, and ethical principles in daily practice. You will develop stubbornness to help you withstand the many compromises along the way to your self-fulfillment. At a young age, and looking back, I was lucky to be idealistic and naive enough to accept two strong personalities as my role models. Swiss graphic design pioneer Josef Müller taught me the ethical rules of design. Richard Paul Lohse, a Swiss artist in the constructivist style and a staunch socialist, was my ideological master. Richard Paul Lohse. Political convictions can hardly be expressed in graphic design. And yet, what is factual and functional about Swiss design is very accommodating to my societal convictions. In addition, this attitude towards design gives my limited talent both an anchor and a direction. Another master, the Dutch designer Wim Crouwel, must take responsibility for me becoming a publisher. His notion that of all printed matter, only the book is meant to last made me adjust my focus. Nevertheless, for many years, my commercial design studio supported my publishing enterprise financially and allowed me to follow my principles without compromise. To compensate for the fact that there are many more fine professionals in architecture and design than there are good clients, I prefer to choose my clients myself rather than waiting for commissions. I try to convince them with my better concept and good design. Sorry, those are blurry. Anyway, so it was mainly in the corporate design field and institutional museums and the foreign ministry, the United Nations, and so forth. You just, you know, I think that's the best advice I can give to young designers. Look out what disturbs you, you know, and go there and propose something better, you know. You may offer pro bono work, that's fine, and it leads to excellent jobs. That's what I did with the United Nations, and they kept me busy over years. So maybe it's a little bit too not appropriate for the place we are here, but for me it was true. Anyway, I cultivate a culture of saying no. Of course, a harsh no is rude, but if you add a brief explanation, you are released with respect, and your yes becomes more valuable. Following an early resolution, I kept my business small enough to keep control over all decisions and processes. I named the company after myself, and don't hide behind a fantasy name. I take the blame and the pride alike for what I'm doing. At Lars Müller Publishers, we maintain a flat hierarchy and allow for leadership through competence. In an industry where income is limited, other benefits must provide the incentive. Of the 20 to 25 titles we produce per year, at least half must be initiated by me or developed with my participation and will be designed in-house, while the other half may be the result of my positive response to proposals that correspond to my personal interests and contribute to the overall program. I don't consider publishing a service to the author, but rather a partnership with the goal of offering the best to the reader in the meaningful context of our program. Our editors and copy editors must commit themselves to the motto, the editor is the advocate of the reader. In this sense, I reject the trend towards self-publishing, which often spares the cost of editing. We may try to optimize the process of making books, but we can't ignore that there are many players and specialists involved. It may start with the relationship or a conversation, a casual meeting between an architect and a publisher, and it will soon grow because very often institutions are involved, the museums, galleries, sometimes a sponsor. If you go further, the editor comes into play, who actually is the interactor between the publishing house and the architect. In my case, it's often myself, so I'm the publisher, the editor, and the designer at the end. But of course, you need the participation of photographers, authors, and I have for long decided I never commission people and pay them for some service. I make them a partner, also they are paid, but they are always forced to behave in a solidaric mood within the project. So we are a growing partnership, and it's good. Probably the architect has most problem with that setup. Anyway, but they learn. The designer, I put him in the center because I would say once and actually the designer should be involved from the very beginning, but once you grow into the content, I think that when the role as a transformer of content into form becomes to play. And it goes on, of course. Now we may be able to shape the book in a way, and then you make sure that copy editing and proofreading and all that stuff guarantees highest quality, and you involve the printer and the lithographer, again, make them partners, not servants, and appeal to their pride. You know, they are proud craftsmen. You know, if you see them as specialists, they like to contribute with the best of their skills. Now again, a book is done when it's printed, of course, but it's not yet on the market. So you include media, you include marketing, you search connection to the trade, and finally you find your consumer. So this is the full setup, right? And that's where it started. And that is what the little lesson I try to give all who believe that self-publishing can, you know, make everything easy and as good. I'm not representing any union or any other interests. It's just my honest experience. Now, my first book, which I published in 1983, was dedicated to the modernist movement in Switzerland after World War II. Die gute Form, good design. It documents Swiss product design from the 1950s and 60s. The research allowed me to understand the differences between the modernist environment of my parents' house in comparison to what was common sense at the time. The book was produced exclusively with analog means. A Macintosh 512K made it onto my desk in 1985 and was only a promise. The system crashed frequently, which was manifested through the bomb, an unthinkable symbol today. It was not until the early 90s that we were able to deliver electronic files to printing. Over the years, I dedicated my books, many books, to the history of the Swiss modernist movement. I was partly influenced by my mentors. I had to free myself from Müller Brockmann by writing a book on his life and work. So free me from my mentors, but also driven by my own search for understanding and by the timeless value I see in some of the movement's achievements. As Henry mentioned, this was my personal homage to a typeface, which just came out in 2002 when there was a Helvetica hype. All party flyers in London and Hamburg and New York were set in Helvetica. And there is a saying that it's all based on an error that in the late 90s, Adobe brought a digital version of Helvetica and named it Neue Helvetica, New Helvetica. And many of the kids back then thought, oh, wow, cool, a new typeface, right? So they used Helvetica for quite a while. So it's actually a good friend of mine in the meantime. And it's good in the hands of professionals as well as in the hands of dilettantes. It's the all-time favorites of all the hairdressers and shish kebab sellers or so. I wrote a serious story about the typeface, and I wanted to be fair towards the other side in the Swiss competition, also only 65 kilometers apart or away from Zurich. In Basel, there was another school, which led by Armin Hoffmann And I used to say to the students, it's not forbidden to take notes. Armin Hoffmann, Armin Ruder, Emil Ruder. And there was back then there was a bitter war between the two cities. And I was always, it reminded me about when I was young, we had fights between Marxists and Trotskyists, you know. And in historic distance, you may say, come on, that's the same thing. No? It was not. So this is Emil Ruder, who was a promoter of Universe, the typeface, while the Zurich crowd was either Helvetica or Accidents Grotesque. And as minor as the differences are, but it was essential back then. This is Emil Ruder, which I had the joy in sharing a reprint of the famous idea issue on Emil Ruder, the Japanese magazine. And what I thought would be a kind of an ending of my engagement for Swiss modernism was this reprint of Neue Grafik, which probably became the most influential instrument of the Swiss movement, spreading the Swiss style around the world, mainly in the field of corporate design. Super straight, grid-based, we may say boring, but it was also rather clean, clear, functional, no jokes. Very successful. Anyway, kind of to balance and compensate for myself, I, over the years, dedicated many books to the history. No, that's not true, that's over. Now and again, I published reprints of rare publications from the avant-garde movement of the 20th century, which deserve to survive in physical form. These days, actually, I received the first copies today by courier. These days, we are presenting a collection of reprints on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the Bauhaus, which was founded in 1919, presented, shown in all books about the Bauhaus, but only published back then in German and never translated. And one morning I thought, wait a minute, that's not meaningful. So if you do a facsimile, a reprint, you owe the audience a translation. You know, so that was the publisher thinking in the morning. Once he met with his people, his editors, there was a question, well, how much text is it? And we realized there is 1.2 million characters. You know, and then Maya, my editor, started multiplying, you know, in terms of translation costs and words per page, and how many pages will it add to our commentary issue, and went on and on. So, and the translation costs kind of exploded. So that's the danger. I put myself as a publisher, you know, to idealize things, and since I'm a bit stubborn, you know, I don't step back if I think things are right. We got some support, some sponsorship by the Goethe Institute, which understood how important it could be, you know, to understand finally what Gropius wrote in 1926, and Herbert Bayer, and all the guys you know the names, Marcel Breuer, and so you know them all, but you don't know what their thoughts were back then in the 20s. So now that was the only kind of promotion and advertising break I do in this lecture. Yeah, I'm very proud, you know, that I succeeded finally, and actually there's even more fun in these, because we also present 4 of the Bauhaus Bücher in English, 2 of them in first time in English translation. And I'm very proud that I succeeded with this concept because 3 years ago, and that's an anecdote from the no-saying side. 3 years ago, I was first approached by quite many scholarly publication projects, you know, researching about the Bauhaus. You know? And there was a bunch of them, and very, very good, and being connected, being with Columbia University, Princeton, Harvard, now even UCLA. You may say that they are bright people having bright thoughts and doing great research, but I thought, oh, that would all be random, you know, if it ends up with me or somewhere else. So I took that decision to say no and explain, and to focus on books by the Bauhaus. So not on the Bauhaus, but by the Bauhaus. So go back and do reprints. And that will go on. Actually, in the fall, there will be another 4 Bauhaus Bücher. In total, there were 14. And I hope that with the help of some not yet known sponsors, we will have all 14 out by in a year's time. Just to say, you know, how I think as a publisher, you, and also as designers, you know, you do not necessarily have to be as patient as architects, right? But you have to plan ahead. You have to have that passion and patience to let things happen, you know? I would love to be an architect, but I couldn't stand it, right? Over that long time, it would not be my life. Anyway, let me get back here. There was the German philosopher Odo Marquardt once wrote, "The future needs the past," and I don't offer these facsimile, these reprints for nostalgic reasons, not at all. The paradigm shift brought about by the digital transformation has detached many people from history. A critical assessment of the opportunities and risks of the foreseeable future thus calls for engaging with the history of modernity so we can better understand it and move beyond it if necessary, right? Okay, this is similar to what we discussed today, you know. You must know the rules before you break them. Oh, there is no break if you don't know, so, right? So, similar with history, you know, we can't overcome modernism or modernity if we don't know, you know, what were the drivers and what were the reasons and what are the achievements. Anyway, so 20 years ago, the independent publishing industry began to decline. Many bookstores gave up under the pressure of Amazon, and small publishers often sold their businesses to bigger corporations. I responded with a concept called Nomadic Bookstores, with pop-up stores in major cities around the world. And Brett, I hope you are pleased to see, in Milano, actually, there was the climax of the concept. In Milano, for the 5 days or the week of the Milano Salone del Mobile, we set up a pavilion on a very, very busy square. And there was a collaboration with a class of architectural students at the AA in London, where I had the pleasure to act as the client, and they were my architects. And the commission was to really realize a temporary architecture. We believe there were 10,000 people just walking through the pavilion, maybe not necessarily take much care of the book, but there were some major events and good parties. So anyway, that was a great success, and the Nomadic Bookstore was and is a manifesto of the physicality of the book matters. You know, many of my books you will see later with plain white covers or black, they look terrible on Amazon. So I really need to get close to my readers and viewers. Anyway, publishers and designers were equally overwhelmed by the changes in trade and technology. The misleading reaction was often growth, while downscaling was not an alternative. And growth does not necessarily mean business, but also the format of books. You know, books tended to become huge. Somebody showed me photographs of the household of a wealthy person, prominent person today, with exactly 3 books in the household, and all 3 were mega big. One was Muhammad Ali, right? And it fitted perfectly to the topic of our graduate class seminar with the working title of Racking the Coffee Table. It can even fall apart only by the weight of the book. And that was a response actually to make this kind of rather simple manifestation to say, no, the book is alive and you know, growing bigger. And I always recall the dinosaurs, you know, it wasn't such a good idea to always grow. So I remained stoic and focused more on architecture books, which had the most reliable market. I took pleasure in publishing early books by architects who are today renowned, and in observing ways to represent architecture through photography while paying attention to the character and atmosphere of buildings. I consider the photographer a co-author of the book and involve him or her closely in the process. Some of these books have set new standards in the category. In dealing with the many images that often come together in a book, now I'm surprising myself. Okay, yes. The wall has proven to be my most reliable working tool. I lure busy authors into my studio and compose their books with them. The design of the book will casually adapt to the content, while the cover design remains my privilege. And indeed, you know, it sounds trivial actually, but the wall really, if the most precious thing in this room are the walls, right? And whenever you have a chance, if you have a project, a kind of multi-page project, be polite, ask for the room, and just spend a day down here, and you will understand so much, you know, what you believe you may scroll on your screen or computer. No way, right? It's walking up and down the wall and just understanding and checking what you see. And it's and it's very, very exclusive. Nobody will ever see the book in this way. And I really managed to get people to my studio, to Zurich. I lock them in. You know, we have good food, good drinks, but I don't let them out. They don't see anything of Zurich. And when the book is done, they can leave again. But we really do essential work. And in 2 or 3 days, we can achieve a lot, which normally, if you do it with these academics and busy people, it will take 9 months, you know, with an email a week or so. So I found my way. Anyway, those are some of the books I talk about where I make, contrary to the rules of marketing, I usually forego the visual representation of the content and prefer typographic covers and clear colors, if not black or white. This, I may say today, it was not meant to be smart. It was, again, stubbornness. But by now it has proven to be the right thing to do, because it offered me much more identity and much more profile than trying to be smart and do the right thing and follow any marketing rules, which necessarily leads to comparable, kind of mainstreamed books. So this was a quite famous, successful book back then, and likewise working with the photographer, which I commissioned actually for the Zumthor book, Hélène Binet. I did several books on Zaha Hadid's architecture, and I love working on the material, the surface, and sometimes I take pleasure in surprising you what you can do on 1.3 millimeter cardboard, right? So the depth actually, which makes the three-dimensional relief, is 0.2 millimeter. That's what the pressure you put on the cardboard to create the image, right, which should be representative for the content. Again, still Hélène Binet, with beautiful book on Nicholas Hawksmoor, the churches, and this probably the best known, the three-dimensional cover. Again, the depth is 0.4 millimeter on a 2 millimeter cardboard. The pressure is 7 tons per square meter. It made the bookbinder's factory shaking every time. And of course, they all said, "Oh, no, that's impossible. That's impossible. Three-dimensional embossing on thin cardboard, impossible." Yeah, give it a try, But that's when you make the bookbinder your partner, You can't commission something like this, That's something they do Friday evening, Saturday morning, right? And I think that is the obsession you have to develop as designers. There is always a way. Christian, no? Right? That's what I learned from Christian. No? There's always a way. No? Never give up. And I think that's a passion that can make you different. Similar to this, the book is not very good, I must say, but the cover is nice. It matches pretty much the facade of the museum. Again, I think it's very important to celebrate the physicality, the body of the book. Again, you understand that it's a touch, and very often, I forgot to say, the Herzog de Meuron Natural History book, it looks great. You see the embossing, but you should know that on the first edition hardcover, there was the same embossing on the back, because it doubled the costs, right? I want to please the hand as much as the eye, right? So the same here. If you create a pattern, just make sure it goes around. It kind of, wraps the whole body of the book. I take very much pleasure in this kind of debossing, embossing play without color even. I love white books. And white again, and you know that white in Japanese is a synonym for not only the color, but also for emptiness and silence. And there will be a book out in this spring where Kenyahara describes 100 whites. only text, one photograph. There's also a book that comes out in spring, and sometimes, you know, there is some. That was the one you were asking for. Color matters. There is an embossing here too, the shape of Latin America. It's a more recent one. And of course there are exceptions where we allow photographs, images. Most meaningful here, if you just write the names of the two cities, you will miss the greater part of your audience. Here, similar. This is one of my favorites. This man is part of the team which won the Nobel Prize for the so-called Higgs particle a couple of years ago. So he's dangerously intelligent, but he gives up in front of his coffee machine. What the hell, you know? And André Paul, a photographer, friend of mine, he spent many weeks, you know, inside the CERN, just watching them. Great people. It's a closed institution, actually, protected institution. Another book, also quite spectacular in the images, is the transformation of the expansion of Mecca, which, of course, in an authoritative regime, they don't ask. They just take down the half city and build it up again. Again, just to allow some jokes once in a while, just take decisions and put the wine glass on a cover. And so I'm not against images. It's not necessarily black and white. It's not necessarily typographic. We have a lot of fun in discussing covers. This is actually the students are wondering why Lars is always on the phone at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's because I call this artist who is now 85, and it's 6 o'clock in her evening, and she expects my call just to ask how she's doing, and when everything's fine, I hang up and then we start the class. So it will always be a couple of minutes later. She is the widow, or was the wife of Josef Müller-Brockmann, actually. So, and that's where the friendship comes from. I'm getting a bit lazy here, and I think I spent a lot of time. Okay. Over the years, my publishing interest has shifted, partly at least, from architecture to aspects of city planning and ecology. I think that makes sense because, you know, bright architecture can only be meaningful if it's embedded in a thoughtful urban setup or master plan, which takes into consideration much more than the solitaire bright building. You know, we used to say, with some exceptions, that the museums are built, right? Well, except in Los Angeles, there are some ongoing projects. But I think that the city has to be taken care of. And those are books we did with Harvard University, with the Canadian Center for Architecture, or with Columbia University, which care about ecology and energy, actually, the hidden energy in buildings. most recent one was in collaboration with the Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York, the Architecture of Closed Worlds. I was a long battle for the title, which should have been this one at the beginning, but then the trade responded that they would. I for once I listened to marketing. Another interest, a passion, is architectural drawings. My interest was aroused by Louis Kahn's sketches. I asked influential architects for their sketchbooks, which we faithfully reproduced. I forced students to understand that the shortest way from brain to image is through their hands, and that no software should be allowed to replace their personal signature. I think if you are familiar with projects by Sugimoto, they look exactly like the drawings. No? It's a one-to-one representation. Soto de Mura, if you know the bold, strong man with a deep voice, of course he has much more physicality in his drawing, much more. I think that is very important. You know, on the computer, it all looks the same. And the thing is also, when you draw, you get much more sense about scale, right? Stay away. Whenever you care about scale, stay away from the computer. I realized recently that, I don't know what program it was, that I can enlarge a detail by 4,000. Oof, right? To retouch whatever details, you know? But you lose any sense for scale. It's all possible, it's all there. Stephen Hall, he does watercolors every morning, as I should do yoga, but it's kind of his mantra is that. So at some point in my career, I had the desire to take a step out of the niche of beauty, and I added society as a category to my publishing program. Today, if I could afford, I would add science, actually, as the next. We'll see. The type of book I developed in this context, which I call a visual reader, refers to an experience I had while contemplating the universe of Buckminster Fuller, the before called, who I call one of my mentors, although we never met. Working on a book on Bucky in 1998 made me understand that this obsession and inventions were best expressed through images arranged in a way that makes them evoke questions and leads to engaged reading, despite the rapid changes in reading habits. Since then, I have counted the length of a text in time rather than in words. The reader is invited to browse through the book and read the images, and in the same time, same mood, absorb short texts while offer basic information and provoke deeper interest, which is then satisfied by longer texts. We discussed in class the model of surfing and diving. So if you offer me some short readings on the level where I enjoy browsing through images, then I may most likely satisfy my curiosity or wonder by reading those short texts without leaving that surfing move. No? Once you get kind of caught by the content, then you may be up for some diving, and then you are ready to read much longer text. You spend minutes, like these shorter texts may be 30 seconds reading time, and longer texts may be 2, 3, 4 minutes per page. You know, but you are driven by your own interest and curiosity. You know, and if we can achieve that, we may catch even lazy readers and bring them back to back to the book, back to reading, they will never read. People who don't read books will never read essential text on the Kindle or on the screen. No. The only people who may eventually, cultivate a habit on reading on the Kindle or on the iPad, whatever, are experienced book readers. No one ever will start reading on a digital device, right? Because it's not inviting. It's not pleasing your eye. You give away something. So to bring people back to reading actually may or initially towards reading is always through the book. And we made some exercises in class. I think, yes, designers must read, to train your imagination to get ahead of your audience. And so start with my books. There's not much text in them, though. So I then adapted this model of books, the visual reader, to such topics as human rights, water, and democracy. A book on systems is in the making. Content on this complexity requires a careful conceptual process and persistent editing. Working on books of this kind gives me a feeling of relevance and social responsibility.
Are we going to do a Q&A, Lars?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm okay. That was short.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have a second.
Oh, come on, you can ask me later.
On these Bauhaus books,
Yeah.
where's the Lars Müller branding landing on those?
Branding landing.
Yeah, your Lars Müller stamp. Where I didn't see it on it.
Yeah, the I hope it was. Is it so far back?
You can just say.
No, I'm curious myself. I want to see it. The thing is, it's on the spine actually. Yeah, no, it comes to my mind. The thing is, we did not add anything. And it was there was a publisher in Berlin who was a pure servant to the Bauhaus back then, and his name is on the spine. So we didn't add anything, but we just replaced his name by our name. It's a tricky thing. It was especially tricky for the Paul Klee and the Molinoge, which have never been translated before, or the Mondrian, that we adapted. It's not a facsimile. It's a first-time English edition. So we adapted the original German design to the English translation. So it's not a proper facsimile, right? So it's a rather fake. I didn't know actually how to. It's explained somewhere in the. We always add a leaflet with some commentary and explanations. I will actually get a copy next week, though.
So the original Paul Klee had German text?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and also the first one is Gropius, International Architecture, Internationale Architektur. So it's pretty close anyway. While Bauhaus Bücher was the brand all the time, it was never translated. Some more questions, please?
Hi. So I'm curious about this, I guess, from the perspective of accessibility. So I have two questions in relation to that. One of them was like you mentioned like the physicality of the book and how most people won't read it in like a digital format. However, like certain people with like disabilities might, you know, use the digital format in order to access the information. So for instance, like there's screen readers and stuff like that which can read the text. So like how do you see that kind of like falling into place, I guess? And then my second question is I guess like in terms of like cost of like printing, because it seems like it's on a smaller, like more craftsman scale. Like how do you reconcile like cost and like getting information to the public, I guess, with the books? Because I noticed that like with posters, for instance, more people are able to see it, like it's more of an optic thing, versus like I think with the books you're going more for like a haptic thing as well as the optic thing. So I wonder like how those kind of
All right,
fall into play.
that's quite a. You want to take a break and we'll
'Cause I
go for
was-
another lecture?
Because I was specifically thinking about the emphasis on Bauhaus and how they wanted good design, but it wasn't necessarily accessible to the average person because of the craftsman aspect, and it became like kind of cost prohibitive for some people.
You know, when I observed, because I want to be accurate, so the first Macintosh on my desk was a 512, right? I first thought it was the 128, which was the very, very first, but it was not. Okay. Now, I made some observations on the internet, and there was this saying that that Macintosh in 84, 85, I bought at a cost of 3,500 Swiss francs. And then there was in brackets given today $18,000. Right? So if you take the equivalent, the first book, The Gute Form, a black and white 160-page A4 format, was sold for 78 Swiss francs back then, right? Would be $380 today. Who, right? We have no books in the program, or a handful of books more expensive than $50. You know? And actually that makes my life difficult and makes many publishers suffering, is that the devaluation of the book, right? And the many people, still the many people making a living out of books, and then you have Amazon offering you 35% discount. Who do you think pays for that discount? Amazon? Okay. So now, okay, in that, and I'm too small and I'm not necessarily recognized in that field or in that discussion. Somebody has to discuss and fight for fair prices for book content, right? And you're not paying for the physical, you know, that's like nothing. You know, you pay for the content, you pay for the editing, you pay for people taking care, you know, designers, you know, creating legible, nice typography on beautiful paper, and I think it's a value, and we have to fight for that value, bring that value back, and then there is no discussion about the costs anymore. Give value to the object. The other thing is, and what we are observing intensely is mainly for academic content, is that we want to offer the book in print and digital simultaneously, right? But at the same price. So the idea is, you know, you have a cost whether you buy the digital or the physical, right? At the same price. If you buy the physical, you get the digital for free. You know, it's yours, right? If you buy the digital, you may have a time frame where you have access to the physical. Or we bridge the medias, like there is a book out which is called Moholi's Edit, with a small little a textbook on an episode during the 1933 Siam Congress, which is the one on the ship from Marseille to Athens, and where Molyneux was commissioned to make a film, which is a 30 minutes film. Within that film, there are 4 minutes which are taken during a break after they arrived in Athens, and 30 of the 120 members went for a boat tour in the Aegeis. And there was a storm and several happenings there, and there's an English architects couple who observed exactly those 4 minutes. With the help of Hatula Molyneux, who actually allowed me to put that very film, the whole film, on Vimeo, and we have a timeline in the book in minutes and seconds which direct to that film. So that's what I think is interesting. You know, I give you the content in the very patient medium of the book, very comfortable in reading, and if you are up for it, you go and observe the very moment in Molyneux's film, right? And we discussed the project today, where you may do the same with music. You know, you offer me some reading, and through a QR code, which I think is practical, also very ugly, kind of, can we do anything against that? You know, UCLA observing a smart visual or somehow concept. I break my hands every time we have to put that on a page. But still, I think that is the future, you know, thanks to the huge data we can move around instantly, you know, that we bring the media together. And then you can enjoy the analog when the analog is best, and you combine with the digital and everything. It's not either or, you know. That was the belief 20 years ago. It was like, you know. No, now it's actually our privilege to live an analog life with all the digital advantages. Yeah.
I have a question with that regard, because the book is such a long-lasting medium, but the digital is so temporary.
Mm-hmm.
So has it happened that you make the links, for example, in your book, and then it links to nothing later on, because there has been a connection that it's lasting, your books can last, 100 years.
I'm actually looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It will be my pleasure. You know, when we get the email saying, oh, that URL is not working, and say, you see, that's why, you know. Yes.
Hello. Thanks so much for the presentation, Lars. I don't know how this question is gonna be answered, but I was curious about like since the last Bauhaus, it's been like a while ago. Yeah. So as a visual communicator, how do you foresee like the next Bauhaus or like the next revolutionary art movement that can impact this field? Or like where's the center
you
of
want
that?
the prophetic answer,
or anything, like what you thought about it, like any, or you can just not answer. It's okay.
No, you know, it's a little bit about history, but it's important that the history in the early 20th century, where you still had a war. There was the First World War, and there was a German emperor, right? And there was a Tsar sitting in Moscow. So it just really, that was old-fashioned, imperialistic, empiric, the European empire, right? Now, you have that war. After the war, you have the Russian Revolution, and you have kind of a revolution also in Germany because the emperor was gone, right? So, and you had the social democratic modern movement, inspired by the Russian avant-garde, which developed something which is called and became known as the Weimar Republic. So Germany became a republic first time, right? So people had rights. So democracy mattered. It was not like just confirming the emperor. It was really voting for the parliament and so on. In a very short time, it should remind us about the Egypt Spring, which failed, right? But in Germany, within 3 years, they had an established parliament. They had, and in 1919, 2 years after the war's end, the Bauhaus was founded by some bright people, and they just were kind of pushed by that optimistic movement of the time, right? Now, if you ask me, I would say, there is no such energy around, We are fixing and taping and gluing and fixing all the little scratches and all the little injuries of our time, And sometimes I believe it all has to do with this kind of trivialization of information. It's all available, so I don't have to fight for knowledge. That's why you are so lazy. That's why you are so slow readers. Because you are not urged. You're not. You're not driven. Don't take it too serious. But it's what makes us different from 100 years ago. There is no risk around. It's like, right? And I not that I wish risk necessarily, but I would wish the energy. And then I want to remind you, whenever you read historic texts about these people who were the drivers back then, check out their age. And you will be surprised how young they were, right? You will say, oh, wow, oof. Huh? And so don't expect an answer from anybody elder than 50 here, right? It's in your hands. As I say, in 30 years from now, you are whatever, doing the shit they do in Washington now, right? Or you do better. Up to you. Come on, it's and you decide now. You can't wait 30 years and then you take over. No, you have to build up and you develop. My disappointment about the time we live in is that it's so damned comfortable and damn boring, right? And no reason to care about my carbon footprint. Others will care. I fly above 4.5 planets. Are you crazy, man? My daughter doesn't talk to me anymore. So I think we should create a rhetoric conflict between the generations. You must raise your voice. You must, and some people do. There are some student strikes in Europe for climate things, and so I don't know. It's not me. That's your business. And be happy that nobody gives you a prophetic answer. Is that it? Thank you very much.